Hello, I'm Amanda Donnan, and it's my pleasure today to be speaking with Los Angeles-born, Seattle-based photographer, activist, and educator Marilyn Montufar, along with two of her models, and I think it's safe to say friends, yes, Chanel Lumiere and Ronnie Clark, both of whom are joining us from Los Angeles tonight. So thank you so much for being here and making the time to have this talk. Chanel and Ronnie are the subjects of Marilyn's 2006 photograph called Ronnie and Cleveland that was recently installed on the Frye Art Museum's east facade facing Bourne Avenue. The photograph just seemed right for the moment. As I said, it was taken very early in Marilyn's career in 2006, so it's 14 years ago now. And so I think presents this sort of youthful callback, as Marilyn has said, to a moment in which she and Ronnie and Chanel were all figuring out who they were and wanted to be, and sort of what their intersectional identities added up to or were going to mean in the future. So there's maybe a hopeful sense of like looking backward to move forward in this way that is full of acceptance and love, that I thought was really wonderful and powerful, and that I think the subjects and photographers will agree, they hope will inspire the people that see it to feel the same. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn. She's going to screen share a presentation and give a little context for the photograph, and then we'll discuss, the four of us. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Thanks for the kind introduction, Amanda, and thanks, Ronnie and Chanel, for tuning in from Los Angeles. I am tuning in from South Seattle, so I'd like to make a land acknowledgement that we are in the land of the Duwamish people. I would also like to dedicate this time, our reunion and artist talk that we're having today, to remember our friends, family, and community who have passed away due to violence and police brutality, femicide, and violence against the LGBTQ+ community. Been reflecting a lot about the neighborhoods that Ronnie, Chanel, and I grew up in, and how that has influenced the work that we're doing today. Again, I'm Marilyn. My preferred pronoun is she and her, and I identify as Chicana. As Amanda mentioned, this photo was created 14 years ago, so jogging my memory to that time when Ronnie and Chanel met, I was being mentored by my art mentors in Los Angeles. My background in photography is based in Los Angeles, and I also studied with mentors in New York City. And at that time, I was studying with Marilyn Montufar, who really encouraged me to think deeply about communities, portraiture, and urban landscapes. What do our communities mean to us? And at that time, I was a student at East Los Angeles College, where I participated in the program Where We Live, Student Perspective, which was actually the Getty's Museum first college outreach program. So Marilyn Montufar, she's an artist who's based in Los Angeles, who also mentored other artists like the photographer Laura Aguilar. And at that time, I can't help but have this portrait of Chanel and Ronnie also remind me of Mario De Lopez, who is an LA-based photographer who specializes in portraiture and was my mentor and is still a dear friend. And I remember him telling me, I know you can do better, try again, and try again. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm trying my best, but I would go and try again. And I remember meeting Ronnie in Cleveland in Los Angeles at a backyard party and feeling like really shy, discomfort, but I think it's safe to say that right away I think there was this draw to each other as individuals in friendship. And so I asked Ronnie in Cleveland, like, hey, I'm interested in creating a portraiture. I'm a photographer. I'm interested in creating a portrait. And I'm wondering if you would be open to collaborating with me. And Ronnie and Cleveland were right away really into it. I also want to mention that at that time, I was studying in the East Coast as well and being mentored by Elena Karushi, who also encouraged me to push the boundaries of portraiture and intimacy. And so thinking about that time also has me reflecting on Mexico City, especially because I'm Chicana, and the first time I went to Mexico City was in 2008. That was a long time ago. And I mentored with teaching artist Beatrice Diaz, and yet again, that was a different perspective. I'm remembering all of this and mentioning it because I do want to acknowledge their mentorship at that point in time, 14 years ago, and also take a moment to step back and recognize the lack of access to art education for individuals who come from the neighborhoods that Ronnie, Cleveland, and myself do in Los Angeles, which is East LA area, South Central, which is predominantly Latinx and Black. So it's a huge honor for us to have our story featured for the Boring Banner series, thanks to Amanda and the Frye Art Museum. And I think, like a lot of creative people and artists, we've come a really long way to share our story today, and so thank you. And I'd like to share my screen for my little PowerPoint presentation. So this is an install shot at Gallery for Culture, where I had a solo exhibition in 2018. And when I created this install, I was really thinking about this journey that I had mentioned between the United States and Mexico. And in 2016, as a reaction to the current political climate, I began photographing throughout Mexico in order to share a different perspective than what was portrayed, like Amanda said, in mainstream media about people of color, about migrants. But at the same time, I continued to do my photographic series in the U.S., photographing individuals like Chanel and Ronnie, who I met 14 years ago plus. And so this is a portrait of one of my best friends, Vanessa, on the left, and her sister, Jessica, on the right. And again, 10 years later, this is a portrait of them. So this is Vanessa on the left and Jessica on the right. And it's actually three people because Jessica's pregnant with her son, Sky, here. With the portrait of Cleveland and Ronnie, now, formerly known as Cleveland, now Chanel, it always makes me think about, again, getting out of my comfort zone, and when I started creating the portraits, and how grateful I am for the individuals who let me into their life and started exploring work in a different way that at that time, for me, was figuring out, like Amanda said, like where am I at, who am I as an artist? And I feel like a lot of the individuals I was photographing were also we're on the road to, well, it sounds cheesy, but we're trying to figure out like who we are as creative individuals. So I've decided to add this contact sheet as well and share some snapshots, kind of like the stylistic journey of some of the shots that we did. There's actually a lot of photos that I think we shot for a really, really long time that day. I have this video that I recorded of Chanel. It's very short and Chanel's here, so I'm just going to play a little snippet of it.
I am Chanel Black from Los Angeles, California. I was originally born and raised in Belize City, Central America. And I forgot the other part of the question. Is that bad? How did you meet Marilyn? I met Marilyn through a friend, a mutual friend, Ronnie. She was able to capture me in my two different personas, which is Cleveland, and then I think it might have been the same day where she took the pictures of Chanel as well. It was a hot. I don't know why Marilyn likes to take my pictures in the heat. It was hot.
Okay, Chanel, I think I always like to take your pictures in the heat because it's always hot in LA. That's why. So here are some snapshots or images of different portraits that I've taken of Chanel, and this was in Chanel's home. It's actually two different places because Chanel moved. So the first portrait of Ronnie and Chanel was closer to, if I remember correctly, I know they're all pretty close to downtown LA, but it's more like Koreatown, Pico Union area. Anyhow, like these are some shots of Chanel, and I just remember entering Chanel's home and loving the Diana Ross, like all of the influence of Diana Ross. And the hate-free zone, which also appeared in the video. switching gears a little bit back to the photographic series, for me in my work, I really like to take a diaristic approach. And so with the road grid at Gallery for Culture for the solo exhibition, I decided to show again a diaristic approach of traveling between the US and Mexico and back again. And being Chicana, for me, there's this feeling, which I'd love to hear more from Ronnie and Chanel as well, about identity and the duality of belonging to one culture and another, but not fully either, which for me, it kind of feels like a nomad feeling of like, I don't know which, I feel like part of both, but not necessarily one or the other more than the other. That doesn't make sense, but. So when I started photographing in Mexico, as a reaction to the current political climate, it was the first time that I started collaborating with lawyers and activists. And this is how I met this young girl at a refugee center in Mexico City who had migrated from Central America by herself, attempting to come to the U.S., but was in Mexico City and couldn't go back to her home in Central America nor to the U.S. Talking about growing up in Los Angeles, I remember hearing a lot of stories about women who had disappeared at the border town of El Juarez, which is adjacent to El Paso, Texas. So when I began photographing throughout Mexico, I decided to go back to Juarez because I wanted to know more about the stories and what was happening there. And this was the first time that I saw a reflection of Chicano culture, like the lowrider in the background. And for me, I was like, oh, wow, like I had never seen that, right? Like that reflection of the border town of Chicano culture. Oops. So speaking of Chihuahua, this piece, the altar piece, I created with my mom and my cousin. And it was the first time, I think, where I started challenging myself to think about how I can create artwork that it was a little complex, it's layered, it's also very difficult to talk about the women who had disappeared, like what has happened, like well, this has been happening for decades. So my mom, my cousin, and I grabbed a 10-foot altar and we filled it with the local region plants, which is like nopal, like cactus, rosemary. And for me, it was really important to create a piece there with the land, also remembering the Cuban-American artist Ana Mendieta, because my mom, we actually went to the area where my mom was born in Chihuahua in the mountains. So here's a little video of that piece. Being in Seattle and in the Northwest, I've been influenced by glass art here in the region. And so I've been thinking a lot with what I said about where we come from, our community stories, the Dodger Stadium. I didn't know that for a long time in that area, I didn't know that the Chavez Ravine community, the Latinx families who live there, had actually forcefully been taken out of their homes in order to build the Dodger Stadium. So recently, I've been interested in exploring archives that talk about history, the history of people of color, not only in Los Angeles, but in different regions like the Northwest, and appropriating the images and bridging it with glass. And this is part of the new series that I've been working on. This is a self-portrait of myself, speaking of the duality of being Chicana, of looking out the outside and looking in. So I mentioned a little bit about our background growing up in South Centro and East Los Angeles area. And so for me, I started doing photography when I was 15, but the truth is that I didn't necessarily have, even though I knew I was an artist and I wanted to be an artist, I didn't necessarily have access to like mentorship at that time or access to necessarily facilities. So for me, it's really important to also be a teaching artist. And in 2017, I was invited by Vermont Studio Center to be a teaching fellow, where I worked with students. This is their work, to teach them how to create photography about the community where they were from in northern Vermont, and I worked really closely with Matt Neckers, who's here. I showed him how to, with Matt, we worked together to show him how to print, install. And so this is a group picture of us, and it's Matt here, myself, and the students. We had such a great experience that I asked Matt if he would be open to creating a program, a photo exchange program with students in Mexico City. And what was beautiful about that, the students who are in Mexico City, is that although the students did not speak the same language, they created a visual language where students in a large metropolitan city like Mexico City were able to share their story and connections with students in northern Vermont. And that brings me back also to the portrait of Ronnie and Chanel and collaborations with each other. And so here on the left are the students in Mexico City, and on the right, the students in Vermont. And to our surprise, the students' exhibition was featured at the Tamayo Museum, Educational Center in Mexico City. As an artist, I don't necessarily see a difference between the portraits I create in collaboration with individuals or the projects that I'm creating as a photo educator with individuals in Mexico City and Vermont, because I think at the root of all of that, we're all working together to empower ourselves and also share our narrative and our perspective. Recently, I've created a photography collective with myself, my friend Vanessa, and Ennio. We titled it Latinidad in Focus at first, and then we realized that in light of everything that's happened this year, as Amanda said, in light of Black Lives Matter, that the word Latinidad is actually not very inclusive at all, and that it's not inclusive to the Afro-Latinx community, so we're actually working on rewording that. But I'm happy to share that this exhibition was featured at the Annenberg Beach House and is now traveling to the Clemente Center in New York City. And this year, where I'm going with the project is I'm starting a new photographic series about harvesters and farm workers in Washington State to highlight what's happening with COVID-19 and how this community has been impacted as Latinx individuals who are indigenous from Latin America. And to do a throwback, I'm actually realizing it's really pixelated, but this is a photo actually of when Ronnie, Chanel, and I first met. I don't know who the guy in the background is, but that's actually the first day all the three of us met. And like I said, I feel like we really hit it off. And even though I was like, hey, I'm a photographer, I want to do this portrait, and Ronnie and Chanel were right away very welcoming. And thank you so much, Ronnie and Chanel, for letting me in and allowing me to create this portrait and for collaborating together. And thank you, Amanda, for featuring our work and our story at the Frye. That's it.
Yay, thank you. That was wonderful. I mean, I guess in terms of, bringing it now in for discussion, 14 years later, what's it like?
So I want to say those were the times where I was really free, or I thought I was free, and more just out there. And, just to add a little bit more, because I don't want to forget this, it's funny how Marilyn has captured me in some of the most vulnerable times in my life. So as I saw that, you've captured me in 3 different places that I've lived. So my first 2 apartments, and now back at my family home. The funny thing is when we met, I was just overcoming homelessness. So as soon as I saw those sheets and I saw Ronnie, I was like, oh my God, that's when I got my first apartment. So for 14 years later, and to see that someone has captured me in some of the most trying times in my life, I want to say it was 2000 and when the pictures with the blonde wig was right after cancer, not too far after my cancer diagnosis and going through chemotherapy. So to have all that and to see 14 years later and for it to be so meaningful, for me, it's powerful. Not oftentimes as a trans person, someone walks up to you, right, and says, I want to take your picture. And back then I didn't identify as trans, but all of that was leading to this moment in my identity. So it's not often that people walk up to you and capture those moments, and later on, 14 years, you can say, oh, this was part of my life. You know, a lot of our siblings die and go on, and there's no one that captures the essence of who they are. So to see those photos, I think I'm just like, whoa, I'm blown away. And to have it in such a beautiful space, even though it's not in Los Angeles, that's not a problem. We'll just fly and see it. And I think it's phenomenal.
Wow.
What about you, Ronnie? What do you think? Seeing it now.
I think it's just like a trip, like life magic, right? Because kind of bringing it back into how we met, I was doing like this play that was kind of addressing like kind of queer issues with high schoolers around like being Latinx and like feeling like they're other. And I think one of the play curators like lived at like this anarchist house. Where the party was, and that's where we met Marilyn. So it's just kind of like this creative activism kind of woven into just the whole process. And then just us randomly meeting and hitting it off and then being open to kind of be seen by each other kind of leads to kind of this bigger moment where I think a lot of times like bringing it into just like our identities as POC people, brown people and black people are often kind of pitted against each other. And for us to kind of be in spaces to kind of work together and kind of see the unity that we carry is really powerful, especially just given everything that's happening now and how divided we are as a country and as people and individuals. And I think that we've been made enemies to each other by forces that kind of benefit so much from keeping that illusion going. And we're able to kind of step outside of that and create. It kind of opens the door for larger discussion for us to kind of reach like this ideal that we're striving to like achieve. And I'm happy that through this piece, like we're kind of able to open that dialogue not only here in LA, but in Seattle, and then for the youth. Because yeah, as Chanel was saying, like it's not often that someone sees you as a POC person. They're like, I want to take your picture and I want to feature you, and you're important and this, that, and the other. And bringing it back to kind of like what Marilyn was speaking to with violence, it kind of is a form of violence, like the lack of like seeing yourself and kind of the internal violence that triggers in like your psyche and feeling like you're less than and you aren't able to kind of live this life that you want to live like as a creative or as an artist or just as yourself. So I think it just brings up all those feelings, just being a part of this moment with you all and yeah, strolling down memory lane to that night.
Is it weird? Is it weird since I know you all are not a couple anymore? Is it strange to have that sort of moment? I hope this isn't too personal, but to have that crystallized, your relationship sort of crystallized at this scale, or it's not, it doesn't bother you at all?
I mean, it's such a beautiful image, right? I think not to get too personal, there was a period where me and Chanel kind of fell out of contact for, you know, various reasons, being young, this, that, and the other. And it's so powerful that this image kind of like brought us back together in a sense to kind of like revisit those things and kind of like make amends. Because I think when you hold on to things, it's kind of, it hurts you more than it hurts the other person. So it's so freeing to just be able to let go. And I think it is like a testament to, yeah, just kind of like that period of like figuring out life and kind of where we were. Because I think that dating Chanel was kind of one of the first like serious relationships I was ever in. So trying to figure that out and what does that look like, and also kind of like stepping into like queerness in a way that's kind of more unapologetic, because I think coming from like the inner city, like queerness is it's looked down upon and it can be very dangerous, and it's something that people try to hide within themselves. And I think like stepping out of like those communities, you're kind of able to breathe a little bit and kind of rediscover who you are without the need to kind of cover it up in order to, you know, survive. So like revisiting those in that moment. So for me, it's not weird. I don't think it's her pushing out, but I want to speak for her. So
no, it's not. When you know what, it reminded me immediately, even though Ronnie and I wasn't on speaking terms. It just reminded me how like intelligent he is, and some of the times that we spend and some of the conversations, and like how passionate he's been about his community, and then to connect years later and to find out he's still in the fight, still here. Yeah, it's no strange feelings.
So I absolutely love that Amanda was drawn to this portrait, because when Amanda and I spoke about the portrait, I was like, I need to check in. So like Ronnie and Chanel, I really love that it's come full circle, and it's been such a difficult year. I think there's so much happening, so it's really nice to have collaborated then and also reflect now, 14 years later, but also have this moment to kind of, I think the photo for me is a lot about acceptance, and I feel like that's also where we're at right now. And I think if it weren't for maybe being part of the Boring Banner series, like perhaps, I mean, we wouldn't be here right now. So thank you, Amanda. But also, I think on a personal level, it's been really beautiful to reconnect.
Would you mind telling us a little bit, Ronnie and Chanel, about the advocacy work that you're doing?
Thank you. So here in Los Angeles, I volunteer and spend a lot of my time with the Unique Women's Coalition, which was founded in 1997. And it was a response to, it started as a response of not actually having Thanksgiving for transgender, nonconforming, and non-binary individuals. And from that event, it went into an actual nonprofit. So this year, we would be celebrating our 20th anniversary of Transgiving. But we've been in business for 20 years, and so here in Los Angeles, we provide services to our specifically Black trans siblings, trans women and trans men. And so I get to meet some phenomenal trans people who are out here in the world just trying to exist, trying to survive, trying to live. And so again, this year it'll look different because of COVID-19. But we are here to do it. And this past summer, we also did a youth leadership program for our trans siblings as well. And so we help individuals if they need their gender marker changed on their ID, their name, access to housing. We have a clothing bin as well. And we even have grab-and-go meals due to COVID now. We find more that food instability is still one of those things that we face, and it's even higher now due to COVID-19. So we even do that as well. So that's some of the work that I'm involved in. And this year we're also in charge of Transgender Day of Remembrance. Right now, currently, 33 Black trans women have been killed to violence. And so this year we want to honor those that have passed on.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you, Chanel, for sharing that. I would say in some of my projects, I've been working a lot with Ruben Esparza. He's a local LA-based photographer who works closely with the Tama Film Foundation. It's like a queer, erotic kind of epicenter in Los Angeles that kind of works to kind of build life into and support queer artists to kind of tell their stories and their narratives. So that's been really powerful to be involved in his work and kind of the work that's happening in that space. Some of the other work I've been doing has been more like cultural based. I've been working a lot with Chico Garza, who's near the Sequoias. Every year in April, we do a Two-Spirit ceremony, which is kind of like a place for Two-Spirit people to kind of come together. Two-Spirit people are people who identify as queer. It's kind of like an indigenous term for like that identity. So it's become a place of like healing for people to kind of come through and step into like that power and remember the role that Two-Spirit people have played in our cultures, whether it's here in the Americas or in other parts of the world. So I feel like those are the main big things I'm doing advocacy-wise. Also, just like supporting myself, my dreams, because that's advocacy and revolution in and of itself, just chasing the things that you want. Yeah.
Your image, granted one that is sort of like a past self in a way, is blown up to, wall size for people that don't know you personally to see. And so I wonder how that feels to you in terms of, I guess, these sort of politics around representation and identity and becoming, like, for lack of a better word, like a poster child, representing these certain communities that you are associated with. And I don't know, do you want to comment on that?
Do you want to go first now?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, great question. So there was a slight, when Marilyn showed the picture, there was just a small percentage of me that was like, but that immediately, I think that was just static, and I was like, I'm gonna put that in my purse and keep it there, because as I started thinking about the impact that it would have for other individuals that are still yet not living in the truth and the authenticity of who they are, I was like, this will be great. Some of my friends who've seen it was like, oh my goodness, I remember that person. So it's a little funny. But when we talk about visibility, right? Our visibility, not only mine, but Marilyn and Ronnie as well. What it does for us, it allows others to understand us. And the more we are visible, the more we are normalized, right, in society, right? Imagine that's going to be up there for 6 months. People who drive by that, and they might have some questions. They might want to research it. Or that young child, I might see that and say, hey, that might be me one day. So I took it to that left, and I said, this is a moment that I don't want to pass up.
I would say for me, it's so personal, because I think at that time that we were taking the photo, I was kind of going through a lot of like body image issues and stuff. Because Chanel was very thin and beautiful, and then I did not feel that way at the time. So I think in the moment I felt like I was like kind of hiding behind her, and there was some period of like discomfort for me. And then even when Marilyn first showed us the print, I was kind of like, ooh, I don't really like how I look right now. And then it kind of began this whole like weird toxic journey of me kind of like reclaiming just like my standard of like what makes me comfortable within my body and stuff. So it's so beautiful, like kind of revisiting the photo now and being able to really see it, mine is all like the trauma and like the smoke and the this and the that. And just, I guess, the result of the lack of visual representation, to where I would look at myself then and think that that's not desirable, and then having like the maturity now to look back and see myself for how beautiful I was then, and now, and then it's just really nice to just have that moment. And then insofar as like visibility and kind of what that means, I just think it's so powerful, because I think when you don't see yourself, it's really easy to feel that you're less than, and to kind of take on other things or to align yourself with ideologies that you feel will make you be seen. So I think hopefully it has that impact of helping people to kind of, as Chanel said, see us, but also see themselves in a way that is beautiful and it's worthy of being seen.
Yeah, I also want to add to that with Ronnie and Chanel, how empowering it feels to have a platform, and as Ronnie and Chanel mentioned, seeing yourself. I remember walking into a museum with Los Angeles with my friend Vanessa, and it was a photo exhibition, and I was feeling like, oh my God, we love all the work, we love everything that was shown at that show. But I remember taking her aside and saying, like, you realize that there isn't anyone who looks like us, or like our story, or there isn't any people of color in the portraits. And I think for us and for her, it was a moment of like, wow, I didn't even think about that, because like Ronnie said, it's such a thing, like we're so used to it that it doesn't even like sometimes even cross our mind. And like what Chanel said, for future generations to see that, or like younger kids to see that and be like, hey, that can be me. So I think it is empowering and powerful to have this.
And so where were you at in 2006? I mean, I was trying to think back to the sort of social context of that time, and it was the Bush years. And here we are in this very fraught moment right before the 2020 election, where, racism and homophobia, transphobia, all of this has really been weaponized to like an extreme degree. I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to draw out between? I mean, we kind of like skipped the Obama years, so I don't know what is gained in this sort of like retrospective look at this time before in this moment. I know you're saying like you feel very empowered. You're hoping that other people are empowered by it too. But I just wonder, in terms of the social context, what you see.
I think for me, it's, you know, thinking back to that time, I remember, now that you said the year, I remember I was not officially a citizen of the United States, and how important that was, and how still today, you know, when we think of everything that's going on politically, with immigration as well, it's like that's still happening, right? Still fighting for immigrant rights and gaining your citizenship. So I think for me then that was, you know, now I'm a citizen. However, it's still conversations that comes up, right? Because especially at work today, we had a conversation about working together with other individuals, you know, Latinx and Black. And so the argument was, we don't have anything in common. And I said, yes, we do. When you think about slavery, right? And when you think about immigrants, you know, slaves were dragged to America, right? They were forced to be here. And it's also similar to immigrants because they were promised better jobs, better opportunities. But when they got here, they were taken advantage of because they've been working for these less paying jobs. And so it's all within the same thing. And then when it comes down to voting, immigrants cannot vote, right? And when African Americans came to the United States, it was the same thing. They couldn't vote. So it's all these fights, but we are still within alignment. So it's an ongoing conversation that shows me that I still have a lot of work to do.
I would say on me, kind of addressing it to the time of 2006 and now, it's really interesting because I think for me, what I remember most about that period was just all the grassroots organizing that was happening as kind of like a response to the Bush era, and like all these like youth justice groups kind of coming together and trying to like drop these like knowledge bombs like on the youth so that we were kind of able to address these issues like in a way that was more that we can act, that was tangible, right? But insofar as like thinking of the community of just kind of like art and visuals back then, it was just like a wall of whiteness like everywhere, right? Like insofar as like what you saw like in ad prints, what you saw in magazines, and then even when you did see images of Black people, it wasn't as intimate or authentic, or they were like modified or super thin or very in shape. You didn't have like natural looking bodies like celebrated in any platform, not nearly to the way that you do now with all the body positivity movements that we have going on. So I think it's really powerful for, in that sense, in that lens, for the, I guess, the art institutions to kind of like step into like that kind of fold of like, how are we using this platform to kind of address these social issues in a way that kind of sheds light on just the Black queer experience or the experience of like those who are less like represented in the media, outside of, I guess, like empty promises of like allegiance versus like how are we actually utilizing our space to add to that, you know? So I would say those are the things that come to mind in comparing the two things, and also just like how peaceful those times seemed, like in comparison to what we're dealing with now, and how insane that was, and like the outcry that was then, and how it's nothing compared to like kind of what we're dealing with now, and just the naked presence of like open white supremacy coming from, you know, the White House, and that's like really terrifying when you really think of it, and just all the implications of what that can mean, and just like what the reality of like that, you know, being so open and like our common dialogue in politics, you know. So yeah, that's what came up for me.
Well, I know, Marilyn, you specifically sort of position yourself as an artist who is using your photography to advocate for social change. And so maybe just in closing, could you all comment on like what role you think art and representation, as we've been talking about, can play in actually creating change on a broader social level.
Yeah, I want to jump in and mention a little bit of what Ronnie and Chanel just talked about as well, of thinking about back then and now. When we started this artist talk, I dedicated this time to people who have passed away due to violence. And I think about that time in 2006 and a few years after that, and the time where we're at now, and looping back with the statement that Amanda just said with activism. And to be honest, and this is, I think, for me, really vulnerable and painful to talk about, I don't quite completely see a difference, because I think about the time back then and being younger, and the first funeral I went to was for my friend's older brother who had died due to police brutality and was shot several times. He was Latinx, and also losing a friend due to violence against LGBTQ plus communities. So I think we still have a lot of work to do. And I think about that time, and I think about how painful that was and how painful it is now to see everything that has happened and how necessary change is. So I think for me, it's like, what are we, I guess, in collaborating with individuals like Ronnie and Chanel, I mean, it's kind of difficult to express, but it's like, it kind of feels like this is our time, and what story do we have to share, and how do we want to do it? And I feel like in creating this portraiture and doing photography is one way to do it and share our story.
Yeah, certainly this is not an end point. Will you continue collaborating going forward? Do you have plans, or maybe it's just opportunistic? When you're in LA next, you might take a new photograph.
I would love to, and actually Ronnie and Chanel and I were talking about doing a portrait, and they're coming up to visit in Seattle soon, so
right.
Maybe now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. We'll take a group photo in front of the banner. Be fun. Thank you so much for participating in this talk. It's wonderful to meet you, and I look forward to meeting you in person really soon.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.